Hello and welcome to Another Day, Another Evil. I'm Gina.
And I'm Melissa, and today it's my week to have a look at an unsolved case. I hate unsolved cases because I just hate the not knowing and it makes my brain feel really itchy.
Whereas I absolutely love them.
Yeah.
Apparently, that seems to be the only ones that I seem to suggest.
Yeah. But of course I understand how important it is to discuss them. This is actually a case that I've not heard of. It's quite surprising, given there is actually quite a lot of information out there. But I picked this one because last month a fresh appeal was launched and Crimestoppers are offering a £20,000 reward as we're leading up to the 30th anniversary. Let me set the scene. So, Saturday the 8th of June, 1996. That was before you were born. I was 2.
Only 7 months before I was born.
Yeah, so you would have been,
I was floating around.
An embryo. The Saturday the 8th of June, 1996, there was a buzz of excitement and anticipation in the air as England were playing the opening game of the 1996 Euros against Switzerland at Wembley. The game finished 1-1, with Alan Shearer scoring the goal for England. It was a dry day, not actually overly warm for June, apparently, reaching highs of 16 degrees.
I think nowadays if it was 16 degrees in June, you'd have everyone's pasty legs walking around everywhere and legs out, bums out and all that.
Yeah, I definitely would not be out in 16 degrees without a cardigan at least. And I think now, hopefully, we do have a little bit of better weather.
Fingers crossed, the sun shining in.
Yeah, hopefully this June will be a lot better. Needs to reach to like the mid-20s at least for me. that is summer goals, summer temperature. Anyway, the city of Bath in southwest England was exceptionally busy that evening. 25-year-old Melanie Hall was dropped off at her boyfriend, Philip Curlbaum's. Not entirely sure about that pronunciation, but
That looks about right.
Yeah, we don't have a lot to say about him, so it's good. Was dropped off her boyfriend Phillips, whom she had only recently started dating, and she was dropped off by her mother Pat, who said that Melanie left, quote, in her usual way, 15 minutes late, borrowing tights, losing her shoes, but looking lovely nonetheless. And she was planning to spend the evening at her boyfriend's flat in Bath, and the pair had spent the afternoon at a friend's barbecue before they decided to head into Bath city centre to presumably dance the night away with another couple of friends.
That definitely sounds like a standard British thing to do in June.
Yeah, barbecue
in the sunshine,
yeah.
Then go for some drinks. Sounds fab.
Definitely. So Cadillacs nightclub on Walcott Street was the place to be back in the 90s, and the foursome headed there. At some point during the night, Philip, Melanie's boyfriend, left to use the toilet, and then when he returned he saw Melanie dancing with another man. And apparently he was quite angry at this and left the club without telling anyone. He says that he sat and waited in the car for a bit, hoping that Melanie would try to find him, but when she didn't, he ended up driving home. Given that Philip had left without telling anyone, when the two friends who had also been out with them bid Melanie goodnight at 1:10 a.m, they were unaware they were leaving her alone. This would be the last time that they saw her, and it would be over a decade later before they learned her fate. So,
that's crazy, isn't it? I think I'd have been pissed off as well, and I'd have probably left, so I'm not calling any shade on Philip at all here.
Yeah.
But, surely they did know that she was maybe going to be alone if they couldn't find Philip to say goodbye.
I suppose it depends how much you've drunk, though, if you just kind of
absolutely.
Knew that you went to the toilet and you kind of lose track of time.
Yeah, you do, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, and I suppose as well, I think the difference is if you're out with a male partner, you maybe feel a bit like if it was a group of girls going out, that might have been a very different situation because I feel like there's very much you kind of stick together as a group of girls. You make sure that nobody leaves
Definitely nowadays.
Yeah.
Maybe not so much then. I don't
No.
know, but definitely nowadays.
Definitely
there is
nowadays.
you stick together. You don't leave anyone behind.
And definitely 10 years ago when we were going out drinking.
Yeah.
Regularly. Whereas you wouldn't feel quite as weird leaving somebody if you knew that they were the partner.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a combination of different things. Maybe they were just bad friends, but you know.
I bet that they'll never forgive themselves, will they?
No, of course not.
That couple and also Philip, they're never gonna forgive themselves for leaving her.
No. Yeah.
I'll let you carry on. Tell me a bit about Melanie.
Yeah. So, I couldn't actually find much about her early life, but she was born to her parents, Steve and Pat, and then she had an older sister by 2 years, Dominique. By all accounts, she was very family-oriented and had kept a teddy bear that had been given to her on her second birthday, and she still had that. She went to the University of Bath and spent 4 years working on a psychology degree before graduating. So I've seen a few different accounts of what her actual degree was. I don't know if it was a psychology and something else. Some places have said she's a psychology graduate. Some places said that she had like a combined psychology and something else degree.
Which is very common with psychology as well. Like
Yeah.
I think there's nowadays, I think there's at least 10 different things that you can do alongside psychology as like a joint degree.
Yeah.
So I imagine...
Yeah, and to me, if you've spent 4 years working on a degree, it's probably likely to be a combined degree, given that...
Yeah.
Unless it's changed, actually, since 1996, and we've dropped to the 3-year degree, but I know nowadays, you only do the 4-year degree in the UK if you kind of do, like, a year working, or you're doing a combined degree, have kind of placements in there, so...
Yeah. I didn't do psychology, but because of when I did criminology, we worked quite closely with the psychology department. A lot of them did placement years, so that could be something that played into that.
But yeah, psychology and potentially some kind of combination in there.
Yes.
She graduated, and then at the time of her death, she was working at the Royal United Hospital in Bath as a clerical worker. She was living at home with her parents, but she was just about to move out into her first home, which had just been redecorated by her father. So they went out on the Saturday night. Obviously, by 1:10am, we've landed into Sunday.
Yeah.
She obviously didn't go back to Philip's because he'd left her.
Yeah.
And then by Monday morning, when Melanie had failed to show up at work, her family were immediately anxious. They knew that something was wrong, and her father said, quote, "Anxiety crept in quickly." So her mother left a note on the car windscreen urging Melanie to get in touch, knowing that she'd obviously, if she came home, she'd seen the note on the car, ring her parents. But after being unable to contact her, and they weren't able to find her, they tried everybody that they could think of, couldn't get in touch with her, couldn't find anybody who'd been in touch with her. So they reported her missing that evening at 8pm. And the officer assigned immediately had a, quote, gut feeling that something was very wrong, and they actually got to work straight away trying to trace Melanie's last steps.
Which seems quite interesting considering... I mean, obviously at this point I would assume they've maybe not spoke to Philip or understand maybe that Philip was annoyed at her or anything like that, but
yeah,
it's interesting to see that nearly 30 years ago there was some good police work going on. You hear all about the bad ones.
Yeah.
And I feel like actually the handful of cases that we've covered, there's been a good mix of good and bad police work in there.
And I think as well, the fact that she's an adult, she's 25.
Yeah.
And she had a set job and stuff. And a lot of times you hear it, don't you, where they're like, oh no, she'll turn up, she's an adult, she's free to leave. Like,
yeah.
Maybe.
She'll have just gone home with that guy and blown off some steam and she'll be back. We've all heard it.
Yeah, maybe she's too hungover because she's maybe had another day of drinking. Yeah, so it's great that they immediately went to work and looked into her. So the last confirmed sighting of Melanie was when her friends had bid her goodnight at 1:10am. And then after being missing for 4 days, her parents appealed during a press conference, and her father said, quote, "As a family we are desperate. If Melanie's watching this, we can only say we love you so much. Please, whatever the problem is, if there is a problem, please let us know or let any police station know that you're okay. Her mother added, quote, I'm frightened to think the best, but I'm even more frightened to think the worst.
What an interesting way to put that, because I think everybody who has been in that situation probably feels that.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've ever heard that before.
You kind of don't hear people admitting that
they don't want to have the hope there almost.
Yeah.
They're apprehensive to feel hopeful.
Yeah. Because if you know something, if you know that, like, that is not what your daughter does. Like, your daughter doesn't go MIA, doesn't, like, run off. Like, she's got a steady job. She's done uni, like, she's always been in touch. She's been really family orientated. If you know there's something wrong, then you know that hope feels... It must feel like a scary emotion to have, because...
Yeah. It must be all-consuming as well.
Yeah.
It must... I've never been in that situation, thankfully. And I hope I never will be in that situation. But yeah, I can only imagine that you feel every emotion. And you feel hopeful, and you feel sad, and you feel anxious, and you feel scared. And there must be all of the emotions going on, because your body just doesn't know what to do with that sort of information. But like you say, because they knew her so well, like, yes, you don't tell your mum and dad everything, and yes, you have a different life, and especially with her being an adult, I'm sure that there was things that her parents didn't know that maybe she was doing or whatever. But if you've got that such a close-knit family, and you know there's something wrong. You know deep down that there's something wrong. So, yeah, it must be scary to try and be hopeful during that time. But again, it must be even scarier to think of all the awful things that could have happened. And I think it's the not knowing, isn't it?
Yeah. I think it's...
And that's the thing with the unsolved cases, it's the not knowing that hurts the family more. And it hurts the public and the whole kind of society around it, and the whole community, because we always look at the victim and the close kind of victim group of family, friends, but you kind of don't always look at the wider society. And I think we talked about this last week, or it might not have been last week, it could have been a different episode, but we did talk about it. But we don't always look at the wider impacts of these cases.
Yeah, I think as well with this, it's kind of the 4 days in, and her parents... Obviously, this is based on my own kind of perception of how these things go. I feel like a lot of the times you don't hear parents admitting defeat. It's not defeat, but they're not admitting that something terrible has happened that early on. You kind of see the early ones as really hopeful, like, please come back, like, we need, and then you kind of get, as you progress at the press conferences, it kind of gets more and more defeatist. So I think for her mother to be open and upfront at the start is really unusual. And again, I might be completely wrong. It was just kind of my perception of how these things go, or appear to go in the media, particularly given that this is media focused. But so the investigation included dozens of officers following up on leads, investigating witnesses and the local area, and divers went to search the River Avon in case she was there. Cadillacs nightclub had around 700 to 800 people in there that evening that she disappeared, and police tracked down as many people as they could, speaking to over 700 of them. And they also combed through over 96 hours of CCTV, which, as you can imagine, in 1996 wasn't the best quality, but they couldn't find any trace of her. They didn't find any trace of her leaving the nightclub. So after that last confirmed sighting of her, there's no trace of her whatsoever.
It is just so scary, isn't it, to think that 1 minute you're out dancing with your friends and having a great time, and then the next minute you potentially nobody knows where you are.
Yeah.
You've literally just disappeared off the face of the earth. And I guess like nowadays maybe not so much that happens, but you still hear about cases nowadays where people just disappear and you have no idea where they are, and there's still no CCTV imaging, or you know, you can track it so far and then they get lost and then that's it. And it is just such a scary thought.
Yeah. They also contacted all the taxi drivers that they knew were working in the area, and again, nothing came up. So of course, one of the first people that they properly investigated was the boyfriend. So we know that the majority of murders are committed by somebody we know. In 40% of cases of murder of women in England and Wales, it's the partner or ex-partner who did it. So police interrogated Melanie's boyfriend Philip at length, particularly given that he'd been angry with her the night that she disappeared, and then he spent the following day alone, and obviously that seems really sus. If she was meant to be staying at your house and she doesn't turn up, and then,
But I guess in that context, he's going to think either she went home or she went home with that guy.
Yeah.
Like, that's not unreasonable to believe. No. And if you're annoyed, and like, it's not like nowadays when you have phones where you can talk to people 24/7. Like, if you've been out drinking and you spend the next day alone, that's really not that strange.
Yeah. No.
If he was like absolutely steaming, or like he could have gone home and been really annoyed and like drank a bottle of whiskey, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And then spent the next day in bed with a hangover. Like,
no.
That's not bizarre.
No. And I think, I see why they interrogated him at length.
Of course.
We're really sus with him. But yeah, like you say, like in the 90s, they weren't in touch. Like, you weren't in constant contact with people like you are today.
No, because as well, her parents would have probably known something sooner if it had been nowadays, because, you know, she'd have messaged.
Yeah.
More than likely. And, you know, that is the problem with kind of the earlier policing of like 80, well, anything before like the noughties and even into the 10s, really, isn't it? Like, phones really only became such a staple in our society and in social aspects of everything in like the 2010s and earlier. Like, when I was I got the very first iPhone in 2008.
Yeah.
When I started school, and like, you could only text and call, and like apps were still very, very new.
Yeah.
And you had to be connected to the internet. Like, there wasn't 4G, 5G, whatever there is nowadays. Like, even like now, like even then, and that was what, 20 years afterwards?
Yeah.
So even then, it wasn't what it is now.
No, that's true. So, even though they interrogated him at length numerous times, he never wavered from his original statements. They searched his home and his vehicle, but they never found anything to link him to Melanie's disappearance, and he was ruled out as a suspect. Of course, the lack of leads and the disappearance of a young woman in the area created fear in the community, and several possibilities were looked into, including whether Melanie's disappearance was linked to several attacks and sexual assaults on women by an unidentified man around the same time. But there was no evidence linking these, and the MOs were deemed to be quite different, so they ruled this out too. So another angle of the investigation focused on Christopher Clark, a rapist who had recently been released from a 14-year prison sentence into a probation hostel, and this was close to Cadillacs nightclub. However, again, the MO was felt to be quite different, and there were no links to Melanie's disappearance, so this was ruled out.
Just a quick one, and you might go into this later on, I'm just curious. Was there ever any, like, did Philip or her friends or anything give any sort of details about the guy that she was with on that night, or like come up with any sort of like sketch or description, not explanation, a description of him or anything like that?
Yeah, we'll come back to this.
Okay, cool. It's been itching on my brain, so I thought I'm just going to ask the question, but yeah, I'll pop a pin in it and I'll let you carry on.
After 5 months of investigations, the case featured on BBC's Crime Watch, where a reconstruction of the night was shown in an attempt to jog people's memories. And there were a couple of sightings from witnesses, which they also included in the reconstruction, where someone who looked like Melanie appeared to be arguing with a man outside of Cadillacs. But this was never confirmed to be Melanie. So even though they included it, they weren't 100% sure whether this was or wasn't Melanie. But obviously they included it just in case it was, and just in case.
That's important. Like, it needs to be included, because if it was, that could have broke the whole thing wide open. And if they hadn't, that would have then potentially been like a really big mistake in the police's appeal.
Yeah. So even though it was included, nothing actually came of this. Sadly, as is always the case, as leads dried up, the investigation had to be scaled back and the case eventually went cold. Melanie's sister, in a documentary with Channel 5 in 2023, said, quote, "Grieving for somebody that is a missing person is definitely different to grieving for someone that you know has died. You have that 99% that you know she's died, but that 1% hope there all the time." And this is obviously what we were just talking about in terms of Melanie's mum and kind of that being scared about the not knowing, but also this or being scared about best case and being scared about worst case as well.
Yeah, you've just got all of this emotion and nowhere to put it. You can't grieve. No. You just don't know what to do with the emotion. You don't know how to feel or what to feel, and it must be just so difficult and frustrating for families that are in that situation.
Yeah. And I think as well, like, in terms of the family's relationship with the police, it's, by all accounts I've come across, it seemed to be really good. Obviously the police were working really hard on this.
Yeah.
So is that something that would feel even more frustrating, because you kind of like, well, the police are doing a good job, but they still can't get the answer that we need.
Yeah, it must be really, but then it must put like such a big question mark in the police as well, because you're going, well, what aren't they telling us? Yeah. Like, we know that they're putting a lot of effort into it. Like, they can see that because there's all the appeals, there's the crime watch, there's all of that. But then you go, well, what's been held back almost? Yeah. Do you then start questioning the police again? Like, we've never been in that situation, thankfully. But like, it must be so difficult to trust the police and feel hopeful in the police and think that they're doing a good job when they're not getting any answers. It must be awful.
Yeah, so obviously nothing's happened. The case has gone cold. Melanie's still missing at this point. So in 2004, she was legally declared dead via an inquest.
And that must be such a difficult decision, because I think we briefly touched on it in our Claudia Lawrence episode, but the decision to declare somebody dead when you don't know must be so hard, and that must feel like giving up. Almost. It must feel like you're giving up because you're going, no, they're dead. Yeah. Not that that is what they are doing. I'm not saying that they are giving up. I'm just saying it must feel like such a big decision to make as to whether to say, because I think we discussed in the Claudia Lawrence episode, or I think we've definitely discussed it before, that it is the family that decide ultimately whether they are declared dead or not. It's not like the police can turn around and say, no, we're declaring this person dead. It is on the family to decide that and make that decision.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of that, I know people talk about closure, like if you know that they've died, it's closure. But then you've got this false closure, because if closure is an actual thing, then there's also this aspect of like false closure, because there is still that hope. You can never, not that you would shut the book on stuff.
You're always going to have that niggle.
Yeah, there's always that 1% there that her sister was talking about.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It must be so difficult.
So she was declared dead in 2004. And then the next break in the case didn't come until 2009, so 13 years after she disappeared. And workers were clearing a section of vegetation near the slip road to junction 14 of the M5 motorway when they came across a bin liner filled with human bones and a skull. So this area is a really busy motorway near the M4, M5 interchange, so it felt like an odd place to dispose of a body, because you wouldn't have the privacy to stop and get out of your car without being seen. But then also, perhaps it's perfect because people aren't walking around there and it is just traffic. And I suppose depending on who it was who disposed of the body, it might not be that odd. We'll come back onto this, but potentially, for example, if it was a taxi, you might just assume that somebody is throwing up out of the car, or I suppose depending on what time, anything, it could easily be mistaken for just somebody having broken down or something, if you've put your hazards on.
I think I'm speaking for myself here. Yeah. I'm not going to try and say that this is what everybody thinks when they're driving, but I wouldn't necessarily be wary or suspicious of a car on a side of a slip road or on the hard shoulder on a motorway. I'd just drive past them. I don't think I'd think twice. I think if it was on a country road, that's where I'd be more suspicious. Yeah, definitely. But just a quick one, was it obviously roads change a lot, so that's like you say 13 years after she disappeared. Was that landscape still kind of the same? Was it still the M5? Was all of that the same?
Yes. Yeah. From everything that I've come across, yes. Nobody said that it used to be a rural road and then it's now a motorway. It sounds like it's always been that same.
I was going to say, I feel like the M5's like been a motorway, like the big ones tend to have been there for quite a while. Time. Yeah.
So the bones were confirmed to be female, and after a unique ring with an ivy motif design was found on one of the fingers, and that was recognised to be one like Melanie's. So the police obviously requested DNA from the family. This was kind of the only missing person who would have matched kind of this description not even at the time, but it was the only kind of unsolved missing person. So automatically before, or as soon as the bones were discovered, it was kind of in the police kind of minds that it could be Melanie. Then the ring on the finger was found, so they requested DNA and the bones were confirmed to be Melanie's. So after a post-mortem, it was suspected that she died very soon after disappearing, so there was nothing to say that she had been kept alive for any period of time, or that the body dump had been recent.
I was going to say, because if you were dumping bones and it was just a bin bag with bones, that would be quite easy to just kind of like throw out of your car and you wouldn't have to stop. That was going to be one of my questions next, was could they tell that the bin bag had been there for a long time? Because also you'd think that there'd be quite a bit of animal disturbance there. But I guess it's probably very difficult to check all of that anyway in the police, especially in 2009.
So I will tell you briefly what was found, but everything that they found basically pointed towards it happening the night or the day after that she disappeared. It was all, they suspect it was all very soon after she disappeared.
In that time frame. And then it has been left for 13 years.
So the medical examiner confirmed that she died as a result of blunt force trauma to the head and face. Her body had then been wrapped in plastic bin liners and tied with rope. Police searched the scene and discovered very close to the body, and this is very weird, a set of 3 car keys belonging to a Ford car or van. And this is 3 car keys, not a car key with house keys on it. It's 3 car keys.
Yeah, which is strange because you normally get 2 car keys.
And also, when do you ever carry 2 of your car keys together?
Yeah, I wonder if 3 car keys links to maybe like a rental?
Yeah, I mean, these have never been linked to anything, but it's very odd.
I find it strange that they've not been able to link it to an actual vehicle. I mean, I don't know. But I don't know how keys work.
I mean, this is The keys, remember, she went missing in 1996. She wasn't found till 2006. They just could link it to a Ford. How many cars have been off-road since 1996? If they got rid of the car straight away, if you're missing 3 of the keys.
Yeah, that's such like a needle in a haystack, or just like a piece of hay in a haystack there at that point, isn't it? That must be.
Which is a shame.
It feels like such a big lead as well, looking at it like, it was a Ford car or a van with 3 keys, and feels like a really big lead, but maybe not so much.
If they had found her straight away, maybe it could have been a lead and you could have traced it. So obviously the rope used to bind Melanie was tested for DNA, but no usable DNA sample was recovered and nothing further was found at the scene. Melanie's body had been naked and her clothes and handbag, which had contained a bank card and a checkbook amongst other things, have never been found. In 2016, new DNA testing was conducted on the rope, and this time they managed to obtain a partial match, but again this is unable to be matched to anyone at this time, which is obviously such a shame.
Yeah, it is, and I guess hopefully as DNA evolves and we get more people using like the ancestry sites and all of the genealogy and everything like that, hopefully eventually something will be found.
Yeah, because obviously we are not allowed to use the genealogy databases in this country.
No, and
which
hopefully
I am definitely keen for us to implement, given how much that has helped catch killers and solve cases in the States.
It would be good to have a look to see if there's some sort of petition around using genealogy in the UK, because as we've seen in the US it can be used for good.
Yeah.
And I think that it should be used for good, and yes, there are lots of ethical implications around privacy and everything like that, but if it's being used in cases, the severity of murder, or these unsolved cases that have been unsolved for coming up 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and we can give families, loved ones, communities closure, then surely we can, I'm not saying use it for like kind of the smaller offences, but I think definitely having some sort of allowance of genealogy in cases like this would be really important.
And also, from my perspective, if I've got distant family members who've opted in to put their DNA on a database, that's not my choice. And then they trace it down, let's say, to us two, based on whichever lineage or however they work it. Then when I give my DNA sample, I get ruled out because I haven't done it.
Yeah. It's only your
DNA sample isn't then going into the national database, is it? It's getting tested against that sample. Yeah. And then because you've not been arrested, we only enter DNA into the national database when you've been arrested. To my understanding. So my DNA might be compared to somebody's because they've traced it down to our generation of our family, but then that's it. That's the end of it for me. And if you've done nothing wrong and you have nothing to worry about, then you shouldn't be scared of your DNA being tested and checked against a sample.
Yeah, no, I think the privacy argument it's valid in a way, but also it's then only valid for people who have done something wrong.
Yeah, and in the States they still have to get a known sample. They can't just take it as, oh well, this person has, we've traced it back to this generation and there's only that person in that generation, for example. They still have to get a sample from that person.
It's just another lead. It's just another lead to try and find out what's happened.
Yeah, and it's
somebody.
so important.
So important. I think it would be good for us to have a little look to see if there is any petitions going, or have a look at starting one ourselves, definitely. And whichever one happens, we will get that popped in our show notes and popped on our social medias and everything to try and change something for the better, because ultimately that is what we have started this podcast for. We both find true crime interesting, but
not just for me, this disgusting thing, like this glorified serial killer. Like, we're not interested in that. We're interested in the kind of the whole perspective of it, including, and most importantly, obviously, just getting justice for the victims, knowing that justice was served.
Yeah.
Bigging the police up when they've done a great job, and then
calling them out when they haven't, because if I do something wrong in my job, it doesn't matter. It's not going to affect anybody's life in such a significant way. Like, yeah, they're going to have
debatable.
maybe a bit of a bad day, but
I've heard some customers
a bit of a bad day, but but I get called out when I do things wrong. That is the nature of being human. Like, yes, we do make mistakes. Yes, we've got to hold our hands up to it. But when it's people's lives and people's...
And it's not even making mistakes, it's when they've just blatantly ignored stuff or willfully just refused to look into a case. It's that kind of thing that that's not okay.
And like we say, definitely, we want to make change. We want to make the world a better place, and because we find true crime interesting, yes, for the morbid kind of thing that everybody has, but also from the victim's perspective and from wanting justice, we want to make change. That's something that we can strive to try and do using this platform, and hopefully one day it will end up being a bigger platform and will keep growing, and we might see some change, and we might be able to create change for people and better the system in finding justice.
Yeah. So, over the years, several people have been arrested, 11 in total to be exact, but no one's been charged. That feels quite staggering, 11 people to be arrested and then not one charge. I'm not sure who they are, there's no information about that. It just kind of says that they've made lots of arrests.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly what information or leads or what you need to have to arrest somebody. I don't know kind of the legality behind that. But for 11 people to have been arrested in links to this case, maybe not specifically under, the suspicion of murdering him. It might be...
withholding information, interfering with the police investigation,
all of that. But that it does seem quite a lot. But again, it could, like we're saying, it might not be anything to do with the murder. It could be other parts, in relation to this case.
And maybe that just actually reflects how good a job the police have been doing, because they have actively been working on it and actively been searching for justice. So DCI Ben Lavender, who is currently in charge of the investigation, and he took over last year in 2025, in case you're not listening to it when we actually release it, he's whittled down a list of 100 potential suspects to a list of 20. So one person who is on that list is a convicted murderer, and he comes up in quite a lot of cases of unsolved people. And I think you discussed him in the Claudia Lawrence case.
I did.
Yeah, so that is Christopher Halliwell, and he's currently serving a whole life sentence for the murders of Sean O'Callaghan, aged 22, and Becky Gordon Edwards, aged 20. He was a taxi driver who abducted his victims from outside nightclubs in the Swindon area, and that's roughly an hour's drive from Bath, so it's not outside the realm of possibilities. They also thought that there were similarities because his victims' bodies were left naked in fields, so again quite similar to how Melanie was left. She was naked, they can't find her clothes. And it also, of course, wouldn't have been strange to see a taxi driver pulled up on the slip road. We've already discussed that.
And also it wouldn't have been strange for Melanie to get in
To a taxi?
Into a taxi. Like that. I guess that's how Halliwell
lured his victims
in. Obviously, I imagine one day we will cover him and talk about Sian and Becky in a bit more detail and everything, because this is 100% the second time we've brought it up.
Yeah.
And I imagine probably not the last, since he is kind of, like you say, has been discussed alongside a lot of unsolved cases.
Yeah.
So I do think that would be a good one to talk about in terms of the unsolved cases and bring a bit of light into those. But yeah, it, like you say, it wouldn't have been strange for Melanie to get in a taxi and nobody would have batted an eyelid at that. So,
and you wouldn't be paying attention if you're just a passerby. You're not watching some random woman that you've never met. You're not thinking, oh, I need to remember her for later. Of course you're not.
No.
Like, if she was kicking and screaming, getting dragged into a car or into a white van, of course that's going to stand out to you. But somebody getting into a taxi, not weird, not suspicious. Also, wouldn't be weird for the taxi driver to drive off in the direction that he's pulled in.
Yeah.
And then if that's the wrong direction at that point, he's already got her in and nobody's going to notice.
It's harrowing how easy that could potentially be and how unnoticeable it is.
Yeah, just there in broad daylight. Not broad daylight, but
in broad daylight.
Yeah.
How many times do you see people get into taxis when they've been shopping, when you're on a night out, when you've gone for a walk? Like, you see it every day.
Yeah, blending into a crowd is so easy.
Yeah, scary.
So the one thing that I'm actually curious about with the fact that Halliwell's still on this list, given that they've got a partial DNA in the Melanie Hall case, why he can't be ruled in or out? Maybe, I suppose, if the partial match has too many points they can match on.
Is there something to do with you can't use it too many times? Is that a thing? Have I made that up?
I don't really know how testing works. I thought once you'd got like the kind of the DNA profile, but then so I suppose maybe they don't have enough because you have to do it on a certain amount of markers from my understanding, so maybe that's the
because we all have similar DNA in terms of certain things, like it's all human DNA. I don't know enough about DNA, but maybe they've not ruled him out because, or maybe it is something to do with the amount of times you can kind of like test it against things. Maybe it's starting to change now, and it's the timeline and the cost and everything like that. Like it costs
so much to
do this, and maybe they haven't done it because of the cost, because there's not enough to link him. So they may be like rolling out the bigger links, the ones that maybe have a bit more information, where they've done like maybe a bit more of an investigation into it, and they're like, maybe Halliwell's number 20 on the list. Maybe he's not that high up, so they're trying to work down in the likelihoods or whatever. Like you say, there could be so many different things, and we don't know anything about DNA, and we don't know how the law works around it, and maybe that could be something we look into in another episode, because I imagine there's a lot to go into that.
Yeah, definitely.
And a lot of deep diving to be done.
Yeah. But anyways, I think he's the main person that kind of gets linked to this case, and like we said, he gets linked to a lot of cases, and he is on DCI Lavender's top 20 potential suspects at this time.
And I wonder if he's one of the main ones, like you say, because he's so well known.
Yeah, potentially.
Maybe that's why he is on there, just because he loosely... it's loosely the timeline that would work, so...
Yeah, and it's similar to his MO, etc, etc. And we're now nearly 30 years on from the last sighting of Melanie, and the police have made a fresh appeal to the public, and Crimestoppers are providing a £20,000 reward for information. As Melanie's sister said in the recent Crime Watch episode to discuss the appeal, quote, "Me and Mel were just young women in our 20s then. Now I'm fast approaching 60 and Dad is 82, and I worry how much longer we will have. Will we ever know if we don't get our answers soon?" And this was followed by the sentiment of her father, who said, quote, "If someone was apprehended and convicted of Melanie's murder, it won't bring closure, but it will mean that the last thing we've been able to do for Melanie is to see her killer brought to justice. I've asked the question why many times, and I think that's the question I'd like to get answered." So, police have also issued an e-fit of somebody that they'd like to speak to, and this is an e-fit of a man who was seen with a woman matching Melanie's description, and they were sat on the side of a dance floor, and this was at approximately 1:20 a.m, and then apparently the woman left at 1:45 and the man followed behind her. So this is potentially the same couple who were seen arguing outside that I mentioned earlier, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Again, we're not 100% sure whether this is Melanie that was seen with him, but they, again, suspected that it potentially is, but again, we can't confirm that sighting, and I realise I've said it again about a million times there. But this is a new appeal. The EFIT has just been released, so I'm just showing this to Gina. So I don't know if you want to talk us through kind of what he looks like a little bit.
Yeah, definitely, and I think it's key to note on a lot of EFIT images of people that they do kind of all look quite similar, and it is very difficult to describe, but I would say it's a man who looks probably a similar age to Melanie, definitely in his kind of early to mid 20s. You know, there's no obvious kind of aging there. He's got short, I'm going to say brown or black, but again, obviously it's a drawing, then they're not in colour, but hair, with a sort of like fringe-ish to one side. It's not a fringe, but I don't know what you call it with men.
No.
Because it's not a fringe, but his hairline that you can see, it kind of comes down at one side, so it's not like a straight cut.
Doesn't have a receding hairline.
It doesn't look receding. He's not got overly distinctive anything like major to note with his features.
No.
He looks clean shaven. You know, he's got eyes, nose, and lips.
Yeah. So
there's nothing distinctive.
No.
About him. He is clean shaven. He doesn't look like somebody that would ring alarm bells. He looks
looks normal.
A normal person, which is such an issue, isn't it? Because you know, that's the problem. Everyone kind of looks like a normal person, and you can't say, you know, there's certain people, you know, that killers have a certain look about them. Like, that's not how it works.
So DCIM Lavender stated, quote, "He was described as being very smart looking, and if that person was you or you recognise that description, then please let us know. The man was white, in his mid to late 20s, 5'10", of medium build, with dark brown hair, dark brown eyes, and was clean shaven." So we'll post the news article to this EFIT for you to look at. And one other thing that the police have released is pictures of clothes that are similar to what Melanie was wearing. So she was wearing a pale blue silk dress, black suede mule shoes, and a cream single-breasted long-sleeve jacket, and she was carrying a black satchel-type handbag. So again, we'll post the article which these pictures are shown in, because they're hoping, obviously they've not found the clothing, so they're hoping that they might get some kind of leads on that as well.
Yeah. Or definitely like other people that remember seeing her. I mean, this is the first time you've actually mentioned like what she was wearing. Yeah. I don't know whether obviously it was known what she was wearing and it's been released beforehand. But, you know, somebody might remember seeing her. It might just dawn on them. You know, they might hear it. They might kind of hear the description and go, "Oh wait,
yeah,
I remember something." and it really could bring the break in the case that's needed.
Yeah. So in the original Crime Watch appeal, in the reconstruction, they did dress the woman who was playing Melanie in the clothes that are described, but I think it's the first time that they've released the images of the clothes that they're suspecting in a more direct manner.
Yeah.
So for our listeners out there, if you or anyone you know has any information surrounding the disappearance and murder of Melanie Hall from Bath in 1996, please contact Crimestoppers for free on 0800 555 111 or by visiting their website, which is crimestoppers-uk.org, and we'll of course link these in our show notes. So that was the case of Melanie Hall, who went missing from Bath in 1996. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next week.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Make sure you like, follow and leave us a review if you enjoyed it.
All episodes are written and presented by Melissa and Georgina Scora.
Editing is by Vicky Hunter.
All of our sources can be found in our show notes or on our website.
Take care.
Stay safe out there.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.